Welcome back to Reality Defined. In this episode, we explore fear, conditioning, human behaviour, and how the stories we tell ourselves shape the reality we experience every single day.
You've got a note here to come on to the topic of where does mindset come from or reality shifts. I think there's a couple of really interesting examples of where normally, without intervention of working with someone to look into it, like a coach or a psychologist or a therapist, the biggest area where people experience a massive mind shift is after a near-death experience or a massive alteration in circumstances, like, again, car accidents and where someone might lose the ability to walk, changes everything they think about themselves. Even just losing a job can be a massive COVID, we saw so many people who experienced that their whole life was about the job that they had. And when they either weren't doing that job or doing it in a different capacity or dealing with technology in a way they hadn't before, some people thrived and some people were barely hanging on. And there was a lot of problems that came out of these massive change in circumstances that force people to deal with a new reality that they weren't ready or prepared for in any way.
Actually,
And
you know what's interesting? I actually think the bigger impacts came from afterwards, right? So
oh,
you know how we were talking about that treadmill example earlier, right?
mm,
So let's say a lot of people were used to running on the treadmill before, and what the treadmill is an analogy for is just life, right? So everyone was used to getting up every morning, and it was the expectation, we all get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whenever it is, and yeah, you have your breakfast, you do this, you run around after your kids, or in my case, just running around after my own thoughts. Yeah, you go you go out the door. There's like the whole routine thing, right? And it requires a lot of the motivation to start and the momentum to keep going. And I think that's what a lot of people, were conditioned to from birth. Right, that's what we were told. All the childhood cartoons were getting up and doing this. Then all of a sudden, COVID hits, and everyone stay at home and don't do anything.
mm,
Right. Look, working from home is not, that's not doing nothing, right? But all the 500 steps leading up to going to work are now gone. So you start anchoring yourself into something where, oh, this feels really good because all of a sudden I have this brand new possibility that life doesn't have to be this difficult or doesn't have to have this many steps, right? That's a hard thing to go back to or to come back from, right? You're now getting up and having to go, I'm going to pull myself out of this lovely possibility of, the only traffic I have is, my partner on the way to the computer, oh, the peak hour, how terrible. So actually going back into peak hour. Right. So
mm,
it's almost like here's this wonderful, beautiful possibility in a sense that not everyone thinks this way or not consciously, but if you are someone, I believe, that is still negatively impacted from what the lockdowns did, not the virus itself, to be clear, maybe that's what it was, right?
mm,
Because all of a sudden you had to go back to doing all that stuff before. It's almost like dangling a shiny, golden chocolate over someone and going, hey, here's a really easier way to do these things you've been doing your whole life. Oh, whoops, it's gone now. Back to work you go. And but I have noticed though, that's why I think now a lot of people are fighting for the work from home and everything else. They are more productive in some respects
mm,
because I love this possibility and I don't want to let it go. And those are the most productive people. The
mm.
least productive people are the ones where it's like we dangled the little shiny golden chocolate and you have to come back to the office and we have to do it this way.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. And
Yeah,
look, during the beginning of COVID, I actually I thought I would lose clients because of the money, because, the cost of coaching can be extraordinary for some people, especially when you're not working. I had an uptake. I had more clients and all my clients were like, we were talking about what they wanted over what was happening. And a number of people changed careers. They focused on what they actually wanted. One person went full time into their business and started doing all of this stuff. It's totally acceptable to imagine that when something massive happens that shifts things around, that it's the natural thing to find something new. And there are people where you can have two people have a car accident. One comes out, both of them end up in a wheelchair. One person sits there and complains about how their life is over now, and the other one becomes an Olympian. Like, that's how the spectrum of like what's possible with altering the way a big major event like that occurs. It doesn't mean every single person has a near-death experiences, I need to do something with my life now. And in all circumstances, it's shifting that they're the natural things that usually shift. But the other one that I think the thing that brought around a lot of personal development back in the early like 70s, 80s, maybe even 60s for the earlier versions of it, was the new age mindsets that came out, like, and they were like exploring, and some of it was drug related, but some of it was meditation related, and a lot of it, the meditation that they were doing and a lot of the thinking that they were doing was trying to mix Western and Eastern philosophies together, or even trying to take on mindsets that were outside of the norm. And this sort of cultural revolutions in multiple parts of the world between the 1700s to the 1900s, they really did have all these moments where they were trying to redefine the reality that they were living in at the time, whether it be through, political upheavals to social changes, including civil rights, including gay equality, and also for people of color and race. This was something where the norms of the old were no longer acceptable, and there's still a lot of fight for all of those things to be dominant, but still, just because you have the mindset doesn't mean everyone else.
I think that time period, though, especially, right? I mean, even though it was still a couple of decades post the war, I think a lot of previous generations through the industrial era, preceding it, were this is how everything must be. But it wasn't oh, we've got to have conservatives that protect it and, argue. What the 70s, like the 60s and the 70s, I think represented was not only here's all these new age ideas, but they suddenly existed out of nowhere. It's not it's not like, oh, this is a possibility that three people have, but you were never able to see it, kind of thing, like we were discussing earlier. This was on a macro level, like a worldwide scale of, you've got to grow up, you've got to have your 2 to 3 kids, you've got to buy a house, you've got to settle down, you've got to go to church on Sunday, to, like the hippie movement, the rock music, and I'm talking about it like I'm 100 years old. It's like back in my day. And I think that was quite polarizing, because all of a sudden it was one world, one expectation. If you talked about something even slightly out of the book in 1935, everyone would be like, "Oh my goodness." It was like, everyone in public was shocked, right? But the 60s and the 70s introduced all these new concepts, and it just didn't exist one day and did the next, right? And I think it also opened up ways for people to come together a lot more in much bigger groups. Expand your mind, as the hippies would say, right? I think they were pretty literal about that, because all of a sudden it was almost like discovering a new universe.
It wasn't that it was a new thing that turned up all of a sudden. It was actually a number of things that those beliefs, mindsets, ideas actually had existed for centuries in some
Yes.
cases. But it was the combination of being able to, it was the telephone, the television, broadcasting that allowed ideas to travel around a lot more freely. And then the resistance against tradition is not, again, anything new. Every teenager in every society, once I remember there was a quote from someone about how young people are being corrupted by the awful music that they're producing nowadays. It is absolutely disgusting, and we should put a stop to it. That was Beethoven and Mozart that they were referring to. We would not consider that today controversial, but there were people who were crying in listening to music, and before that, no one understood why the hell anyone was crying. Fast forward, Elvis Presley gyrates his hips, and girls uncontrollably start screaming. People start having a reaction to that too. But it's no different from Mozart playing music that moves you so much that you start bawling your eyes out because you're moved by the way that the music hits you. It just hits you differently, obviously, in those generational gaps. And
Yep.
people decided every generation has pushed against what is seen as traditional and the way things are. And sometimes progress is made because there is always a teenager that goes, no, I don't want to do it like this. I want to try my own way of doing it. And it's funny because every teenager believes that they're setting up everything new. They're discovering everything for the first time. But reality actually dictates that, no, this has been done a
Yeah,
1,000
yeah,
times before. Another conversation that's very interesting because it's like abundance versus lack, right? There's also another aspect of abundance that we've not really discussed, so I'll bring that up as well. But I promise it relates. So one of the aspects of abundance, it's people who are looking into this, right, will find that it sounds. I'm about to have a conversation that sounds like it's very old, like that it's always been around, but it's actually the conversation of abundance is probably less than 60 years old at best, and it relates to going back to nature, going back to the natural. And one of the conversations that I love is this idea that when human beings were hunter-gatherers in that early prehistoric stage, and we went where what we needed was, right? So we went where the food was. When it got cold, we went where it was warmer, or we made things to make ourselves warmer. We went where what we needed, what resources we needed. We went to where it was and remembered so we could go back there next time we needed it. Then this massive revolution happened called the agricultural revolution, or the agricultural age. And what happened is now, instead of going where the food is, I now make the food grow here. But then there's a problem. I now need to make here work. And while the physicalness of fighting off anyone trying to take things from you or organizing a society around what you're doing, there's another thing that happens as well, which is before the mindset was, I'll do everything myself. I'll work, like, we'll go where we need to go. We'll work as a community to go where we need to go, support each other. Where agriculturally, you don't need as many people to do one particular type of work. So it gives specialization a chance. But it also comes up with a mindset shift that seems very logical to have happened, which is being positional. And this is the interesting thing. There are 100 different ways to get to the same result. Hundreds. We often worry about just one because we choose one and then we go with it, which sometimes works. It can produce results if you're very one-minded about something, especially if you're like, I'm going to make $1 million sort of and go that sort of hustle mindset.
That makes the rest not exist to the person because it shuts that off over
blinkers them
time.
away.
Because I can tell you this, Gerard, there is no way I can think of 100 ways to grow cabbage.
Hundreds of Oh my God! Look, I'm not an expert on that, but I can tell you now. Anyone who's from that industry will go, oh, well, I can tell you 20 different ways off the top of my head, and if you have the right people, you can literally create. Like, there's 100 different ways to build confidence. There's 100 different ways that you can communicate. There are people who can communicate without words and just the way that they're looking at you. I'm not going to try that on video because our listeners on our podcast side of things will not hear what we're doing. But yeah, there's a glances and looks that can communicate just as powerfully as any amount of words. And this idea that one way of doing things works, and then I have to make it work, and I have to fight the urge to do anything different becomes really stuck. Because I'll often hear people like, here's another way of doing it. I won $1 million, but I want to win it from Lotto. So now there are only two options. I either win it or I don't. And I'm upset every time I lose, but I keep playing till I win. And there's nothing wrong with people who play Lotto, by the way. I'm not picking on you for that. I'm just saying this mindset that I can only do it this way versus you could start a business. You could get a job that's very dangerous, that has danger money to it, or, work really hard in your field and become the most senior person, the expert on everything particular to this very niche subject. And you're the only one that can be paid to find out the current information around this thing. So there are ways in which you can be a millionaire or get millions of dollars in your bank account.
Yep.
It depends which ones you like. And so this is the problem with, so abundance often is not just about the lack of something, which we will talk about as well. It's the concept that being positional limits the ability to look at all the alternatives, and actually that the other alternatives exist and that you can choose a different one, or even better, I can choose one, it doesn't work. Next. And then a lot of people have this thing around failure that abundance deals with, it, which is failure in reality is only the lack of taking any further action. If you start a business, you may not be wealthy from starting your business, but you're successful until you stop,
Yes.
because you only are an unsuccessful business person when you're not in business. I remember someone saying that once and thinking, I thought that sounded so convoluted at the time. But now the reason I use that as the example is, if you're not taking action and you've given up, that is the only time you can fail. You cannot fail in continuing to find new ways to get to that thing, because your commitment doesn't die until you stop looking for a way to fulfill on it.
Tradition is something human beings cling to as a sense of safety and familiarity. You know,
Exactly.
it's like Christmas, you know. Well, if Christmas happens every year, if we pull out that tree and we put the decorations up and we buy presents and, sing really horrible songs, the world will keep turning.
Yeah.
Like, it because it does. Oh, I mean, Christmas also feels good, but it is a sense of familiarity. It's a sense of safety because no matter what, this event still happens.
Yeah, one thing that's very natural for human beings is pattern recognition. And we like to think that if we do certain things that they will produce the thing that we did last time. And in some cases, the problem is we don't even know why we do them anymore. I love my history, and I love going back in time and looking at how things evolved into what we have. My favorites are, this is the caveman way of saying I don't have a weapon in my hand. But you and I would say that is saying hello, or what? Sorry, I'm waving my hand back and forth, like in a waving matter for those listening in. That's saying hello. If I put my hand to my eyebrow, that's called a salute. That's when knights used to raise their visors so that they could see, and then a visor raised meant I'm not going to attack you. Again, that's now a mark of respect in the military, that they salute each other if they are of a certain rank potentially. And so it's a mark of respect and ceremony to do that now. But it's
But so,
interesting.
so,
Go ahead.
so in that case, right, if there's an action that looks or feels good but no longer relevant, you change your mindset but not the action. You change your mindset as a reason to keep it. That can go the other way also, you know?
Yeah.
Getting on that treadmill, last week, oh well, I didn't get on that treadmill because, look, my breathing's just not what it used to be. Your breathing clears up. Oh, my leg's sore. I know I've just turned Christmas into something bad. I really apologize.
No,
Please still buy me presents this year.
So yeah, I think another thing that I'd bring up, come back to abundance again in terms of what we're talking about, right? And the other aspect that we've spoken about in depth is abundance versus lack. So for me, one of the things, my business name is Abundance Call, and the reason that I use that name is it came from a literal call that I had with people. They were all working on projects that they were achieving, and they needed resources, they needed people, they needed money, and often they'd be finding themselves sort of stuck because they didn't have enough of it, or they didn't know where to find it, or things like that. So we would just go through this process where I would get them to say the thing that they wanted abundance in, and that they felt they had a lack of or not enough of something. And then I would define abundance as more than you need, never to run out, never to dry up or end, that it's always available just at your fingertip reach, just in front of you, that easy and that accessible, constantly available, no problem. And then I would then say, and the real big problem with what I've just said is, while that sounds really great, it's true right now. And then the next part of the conversation was getting everyone to tell me, what popped up for them? Because as soon as you're being told you have the thing that you lack, you have an opinion about that. And they all express their opinions. And then I said, great. And it would start with the nice ones. Oh, that sounds great. I love the idea of abundance of wealth. I have $0 in my bank account, but I love the idea of it. And then you have someone who gets sort of sick of it and starts the real fun, which is where they go, I have no money right now. How can you say that I have an abundance? And then they go into all the reasons, justifications, and excuses for what it is that's the reason they don't have it and can't have it. And then everyone else gets on board. But then the best part happens is where I say, and this is the shift in the mindset right here. Everything you've just said, everything you say to yourself, you say to others, you think in your mind about this subject is literally the only thing that's stopping you from experiencing the abundance and staying in that lack. And I'll give you 2 examples that I think were just the funniest ones. There was this one lady who was, I need to fly to WA from Sydney and I don't have the money. And I need to do it, but I don't have the money. And when she got all the things that she had in the way, I think what it was, she didn't want to owe anyone anything. And people were offering to pay for her to fly to Western Australia because they knew that it was going to make a difference to what she wanted to achieve, and pay, like, give her money, spending money even, to go there so that she wasn't just stuck there, right? And she didn't want to owe people money. And when she realized that was the only thing stopping her from getting to Western Australia, she had her ticket the next day. But another one, I often got people wanting an abundance of time. And one lady, like, started laughing hysterically. And I said, I need to know what it is you just got. And she said, when I get home from work, I cook dinner, and then I sit in front of the TV and I eat my dinner, and then I put my plate in the sink because, I'm too tired to do the washing up right now. And I've got my dog. And so I wait until the end of my show, and then I'll take the dog for a walk, and it's almost midnight and the dog just needs to wee so that I can go home and I can go to bed and I don't have to, like, start the next day. And then she goes, and what I actually get is, if I wash the dishes straight away, it's not caked on and dry the next morning, which takes twice the amount of effort and time to clean it than when I clean it straight away. Watching my show or not watching my show on TV doesn't matter. Like, I need to relax, but I can relax as well. And I could take the dog for a walk straight after I do the washing up, because then, I'm not angry with my dog for not going to the toilet, because it's natural that it would want to, but I'm in a hurry and I'm angry versus I'm enjoying spending time with my dog.
You know something interesting? Time is one of those things that a lot of people have lost emphasis on. And it's actually the most important currency that we have. It's the most important, it's the most expensive by any means, because if you think about it, you don't know how much of it you've got. You can't exchange it. You can't refund it. Nothing, right? This is a concept I grasped a very long time ago, and ever since I did, I don't care if people don't give me Christmas presents. You can still buy me presents, like that would be lovely. But but it doesn't bother me in that sense. But if someone chooses to spend time with you, right? Now this is relationships, this is work, like everywhere in your life. If you have someone, right, who wants to spend the majority of their free time with you, that is an extremely special thing that person gives, right? But that's long lost in all the other stuff that happens. Like, oh, they never clean up the dishes. Oh, they don't call when they finish work, or all these things, right? I'm like, yeah, but they keep turning up. They keep coming through the door. They chose to spend all that time with you. They could be spending it with other people, right? If I give time to someone, if I give time to somebody,
Yeah.
like, I mean it.
Well, the only reason I'd say you have to be careful with that is there's a really great conversation around the 5 love languages, which a relationship counselor, I think it was a religious man, came up with this idea that there were 5 love languages, and one of them is quality time, not just time, but quality time. But
That's a separate concept to what I'm sort of going on about,
Yeah.
though.
But I'm
Yeah.
just saying you've got to be careful because for some people they won't value time over acts of service, or they may need the
Yeah.
words specifically "I love you" to
Yeah.
feel that that person loves them,
Oh,
and it
look,
doesn't matter how much time they spend with that person, they don't.
yeah, I agree with you on that. Where I'm coming from with this is that this is actually the starting point, right? So when you're in a position where everything's terrible, like you can't see the positive, maybe start with that, right?
Mm,
This person, yeah, the relationship might not be perfect, and there's all these things that happen and don't happen and everything else. But out of all the time that that person can ever refund, they're still spending it in a relationship with you. That doesn't mean they're spending it sitting next to you doing fun things. Like they could still be in another room not talking to you, right? But it's a start. And I think it's a start on the way, and abundance is a big thing, right?
mm,
With this, because if you can appreciate that, yeah, the time's not being spent well with you, but it's still being spent with you and not others, right? And I'm not saying that you accept that as the standard, which I think is where you were sort of talking about the quality time. I'm not saying that we sit there and we go, we can just accept that, right?
mm.
But it's a good place to start when you're trying to shift a mindset from something that's always so negative. You have to have a foundation to put a new mindset on. And I think the time as a currency in that respect may actually be a good place to start. But I'm not saying you accept it as like, oh, they spend time with me, I shouldn't complain. Not, no.
Well, I can also show you an example of where that's the reverse is also true.
Mm.
So I had a client who thought that she needed to lose weight, and that's what she was coming to me for, was like coming up with like coaching plan around weight and attractiveness. And what actually was going on was she was working and found out she was pregnant. And her and her husband sat down and worked out that if he did extra hours and he worked long shifts and
Mhm.
extra things, she could actually spend as much time as she wanted with the baby when
Mm.
she had the baby. And so she got her maternity leave, and then she, let them know she wasn't going to come back for a lot longer than normal, for that business anyway. And her husband went and spoke to his boss, got the extra hours, got the extra shifts. And then what was going on was she was spending her entire day with a baby. And there's a certain way you talk to babies that she was talking like this all the time to them. And it's really annoying after a while as well, by the way, if you, yeah, I don't have to do the rest of that. But when he was coming home, he was tired. He wanted to just eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed, and then
Mm.
go to work the next day and the next and the next and the next. But her experience was she's been talking to like an infant all
Yep.
this time and not really connecting with any friends or anyone outside of home. So when he came home, she just wanted to talk to another adult.
Yes.
And he was not capable or interested in doing that at the time. And what she experienced was she must be unattractive because he used to always talk to her. They
Mm.
talked about what they were going to do to have her having the baby and her being able to spend time with the baby. And that's something that she really wanted to do. And he
Yeah.
really wanted to be able to give that to her. But the problem is, time passed and she thinks, I need to lose this baby weight because he doesn't find me attractive anymore. That's why he's not talking to me.
Mm.
But actually, when we did the looking, what was actually true was the lack of time he spends with her is not because he doesn't love her or he doesn't find her attractive. It's because he wants to have her choose if she wants to spend more time with the baby and raise that child rather than putting it in childcare. And it's fine if you did it either way for those people who are listening. But in their case, he wanted to provide that opportunity for her. If that's something she wanted to do. And she wanted to do it. And then
But
she got
yeah.
how much he loved her
Yes.
from how he spent his time, which is exactly what you're saying, but in a different way. So
Yes.
in case people get stuck.
Yeah, he's still spending a lot of time doing the extra work, which is contributing to the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, my point is, yeah, use time as the base. Where is it all being spent? And it could be in all sorts of ways. They're not conventional.
No.
Yeah, someone
Um,
could spend.
Tell you what, I've got something that I think I might like to share, if that's all right.
Yep.
I will give away a nice little freebie tidbit of advice that I give to most of my coaching clients that haven't got this beforehand. Would you like to know the secret to an abundance of time?
Do it.
Right? You ready for this?
Yep.
The only thing you've got to cut out of your life is worrying. And I mean thoughts, conversations in your head with others about what it is that you don't want to do versus the action that you need to do in the first place. So if you're like, I don't want to have to go to the gym, I don't feel like I need to go to the gym, then you probably just need to go to the gym. If it's a thing at work that I just really don't want to do this project, I really hate this project, or I hate this aspect of the project, the doing it is so much faster than the concerns, the worries, the conversations about, does Joe know that I don't like doing this? Oh, I think he's doing this to just spite me. All of that conversation takes up so much time that
Can I add to that though? I think the
yeah,
other thing, and I agree, I think the other thing though is it can also be spending the time thinking about, especially if it's something you really don't like doing or your brain just won't do. Like, I mean, I have things like that, right? Thinking up strategies on how it can be done, but you're not the one doing it, right? Can you
delegating.
to do
Yeah.
something? Obviously, you can't get someone to run on the treadmill for you. I mean, that'd be lovely. I don't think AI is quite there yet. I mean, I'm sure ChatGPT is going to be very thin when we figure that one out. Yeah, that could also be it too. If you sit there with that particular thought, it's not getting done either way, and you might have someone around you that's quite capable.
Yeah. But the reason I share this as well is I can tell you from personal experience that when you're not focusing on the worrying, or you're noticing it and letting it go so that you can actually get into doing the action first, what you end up is getting really bored, because a natural side effect of an abundance of time is having to find more things to do. And the joke has always been, if you want to get something done, you give it to a busy person, because busy people get stuff done fast because they don't worry about the doing or the not doing. They actually just get stuff done. But the people who find that they just work piles up and things take so much longer. In the case of that girl that I was telling you about, that was the lady, sorry, that was talking about, who had the dog and the washing up and everything. The thing that she was worried about was losing that relaxing time. But she wasn't relaxing anyway because
Yeah.
she was angry at the dog. She was angry at herself for leaving the washing to do the next morning, but she wasn't doing anything about it because she was worrying about why she wasn't doing anything about it. And it's this funny cyclic experience where
I
the
think it's
thinking
also
kills it.
it's
Yeah.
hypnotic.
Yeah. Well,
You literally you're walking around like you're in hypnosis, right? Especially if you've got a lot going on and I've got all these things to do and this isn't going well and then this thing over here, it might feel like 5 seconds, but you look at the clock and you've just wasted 20 minutes.
the number of people who are in like corporate positions that have 5 different meetings about the thing that they need to do rather than the action that needs to be taken to actually do it. So many people, what is it? This meeting should have been an email is
Mm.
quite often people's experience, and it's because management or the team leader or the team itself is worrying about what they should be doing and how they could do it better. And there's a difference between strategy and worrying. Strategy is very centric. Like,
Mm.
let's get to where we want to go. It has a direction. Worrying is a little bit cyclic and goes around. You can tell if it's worrying, if it's repeatable over and over again. It is not strategy if what you do is this going wrong? How can we fix it? Is this going wrong? How can we fix it?
There's
It's
also
mindset versus what is survival.
yeah.
Because all the fear-based stuff is a survival technique. It avoids something. It makes us try and do things to prevent. It's always based on the past. Whereas mindset is about the right now and the letting go of everything that came before, not necessarily forgetting it or ignoring it. It's very much more about doing something with what we have now than dealing with what we're trying to do, not based on the thing that we did before.
Do you know what I think might cause this as well? in modern day, like, the fear back in the day was, oh, oh, here comes a bear, or, in some parts of the world, you're probably running from a Bengal tiger or something, good luck. But is that translated now into, you either have a mortgage or you rent, right? And especially in corporate worlds and in jobs, is this a side effect of, the thing is, if I lose my job, I can't pay the mortgage. I can't pay the mortgage, I lose the house. I have to live it. It's almost like a slow burn as opposed to a tiger jumping on you, right? But if people now move the fear from the Bengal tiger to that, and then also, I won't be able to afford to buy food and blah, 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 and so on and so forth, right? Now, in many cases, most people would quite easily just get a new job, right? That's not always possible. But even if, they are really good at what they do and they could easily land a new job, the certainty's not there at that point in time. Is that where it's all shifted? So the mindset has, and this is once again, this is one of those things from what we're taught from when we're born. You wake up, you go to school, then you leave school, you get a job, and then you buy a house and you settle down, blah, 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 blah. And that's what the fear is now attached to. Because back before all of this, it was you wake up every morning, oh, it's a nice day today. You pop out, you go into the bushland with your spear and your bow and arrow or whatever it was back then. Maybe the aliens back from, how they say aliens with ancient Egypt, maybe they had laser guns, I don't know. Either which way, they had to run from scary animals. Now, it's not scary animals, it's that scary person at the bank that could send me a foreclosure notice.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real fear, but it's how do you shift the mindset? And it's in that level 2 we were talking about earlier. It's not a primal instinct. It's what it's moved into and it's going to move into something. And I think it's making the decision of what that thing is.
I can give an exact example of this. I had a client that I had for about 3 years before COVID and a couple of years after. And what was really fascinating was there was this moment in time. We'd been working together for quite a while. I was helping her towards clearing her debt, having her business be her main stable source of income. And she lived in a beautiful place in the city, and it overlooked a parkland area, which was just extraordinary for the area as well, right? And one day I had a conversation with her where I said, "You're not happy there. If you could be anywhere, where would you be?" And this is during lockdowns. This is during the state borders being shut. And she goes, "If I could live anywhere, I'd like to live in far north Queensland." After a lot of, I love working, I love here, I love here, I love here. And it's like, you love the original idea of living there. You don't love living there anymore. You don't like, the neighbors were annoying you, things were going wrong, and there was work going on in the place, and you're not happy there. And you're not happy being in the middle of the city with everything that was going on at the time. And she's like, "Yeah, but there's no way that I said, "That's not the point. Let's come up with a plan." And we did the planning. By moving from this house in the city to far north Queensland, she cleared all of her debts. She owns the house she has right outright. She lives in a community of like-minded people that are all connected. Like they've got paths to each other's houses. It's
Yeah.
this really lovely community.
It's almost like playing that game Stardew Valley.
Yeah. And she's totally everything from that has changed. Now, this is not for everyone, right? Because the other thing that happened was she was always told that you have to go get a job. And she was artistic, she's a healer, she's someone that works with people and loves people. And she was encouraged to work. And she had a job and she had a business on the side. And the problem was the business is what she loved, and she did the work so that she could do the business. And during COVID, I'm like, this is fantastic. This gives you the opportunity. She lost the job because she was working for a university and you couldn't be face to face. And so her job was made redundant just by literally not being face to face anymore. She was an administrative role that stood there at the door getting people in. She lost that job, and I'm like, this is fantastic. Now you can totally focus on your business during lockdown and build all the things that you need to build so that when things started opening up again, she had a shop in World Square, which is like right in the middle of the CBD of the city. She had art classes that started with smaller groups and built up. She was adamant that she could never do more than one-on-one classes. Then she tried 2, then she tried 4. Sometimes she had 8 or 16. But she broke free of all these constraints of how she believed the things were going to go. And each one of those mindset shifts that was a departure from the past allowed for her to get where she is today, which is she grows her own food on this beautiful far north tropical Queensland. She loves the lifestyle that she has there now. And
Do you
now she has
wanna
now she has new problems now that she's debt free and running her business full time and studying on top of that, by the way. But
what
and I'm sure that she wouldn't mind. Like, I'm not going to share her
Yeah.
name, but sure she wouldn't mind me sharing all of this about it because, and she might have her own input that she might want to come and do an interview with us in the future. But when all of this shows, like, we were working on the abundance mindset,
Yes.
a specific type of, like, there are many different types of coaching out there, and abundance is just one of many different mindset groups that are out there. And there's nothing wrong with any of them. There's not one better than another. It's just one that works for certain people and not others, right?
I also wonder, and look, the one thing I have seen a lot, and I think there is a clear example of this here as well, is your life or how you perceive your life to be is held up by a number of certain pillars, so you might have a very long-standing relationship, you might have a very long-standing job, a long-standing member of the family. I mean, there are people that, in some cases are in their 50s, 60s and 70s and still have their parents. I mean, obviously, by the time you're in your 70s, that's quite rare. It is possible and does happen, right? As soon and your life, it sits on top of, or you've integrated them in with all of these pillars. And I think what's happened in this particular case, the loss of the job, the pillar crumbles, right? Like the whole structure doesn't collapse, but all of a sudden it's waving, right?
Mm,
And is that the moment where you can do, most people end up shifting a mindset, like where it's not intentional, because all of a sudden you need something to replace that pillar, right?
mm.
And that could be, I might chop down those 2 pillars too, but have one big stronger one. Or you're looking to replace it. And is that where people unconsciously, not consciously, end up changing a mind shift and start seeing something in a different way? Because one of those pillars was disrupted, especially if it's something that's been a huge constant.
The thing that's actually quite funny is I've had arguments with especially first year uni students who
Mm,
tell me that they've learnt a lot of things and it's the truth now. And I say, well, that's not your opinion, that's not your belief. Someone else has given that to you.
mm,
And then, no, I've thought it in my head, therefore it is my thought, my belief. And the reality is human beings, we actually have very few original thoughts that don't come from something else that we've inherited from our families, friends, cultures, education. Like been informed, and we might feel like we have informed beliefs and opinions, but quite
yeah,
often a lot of them come from someone else and
yeah,
we justify that they're ours. But actually, you can tell if someone says something that was said 1,000 years ago in a particular way, and they're just parroting or paraphrasing that belief. It's not theirs to begin with. It's something they've believed in, but it's not their own personal belief.
Well, is it
I know
also
that's different from what we're talking about with like opinions and
well, I was gonna say, is it even end up being the same belief, right? Because when someone tells you something like that, that's your interpretation of what they said based off the interpretation of what they saw, and then it just keeps going like that. It's
I'll give you a really good example of racism, sexism, homophobia, and chauvinism, right?
Yeah.
Do you know that all of those actually have an origin in one event in human history? And it's worse, there's another one where it's like people who are against vaccinations came from the exact same period of time as well. All of it came from the Black Death. It was a plague that ravaged Europe, and people, especially in English-speaking cultures, have imported this conversation from a
Yeah.
period of time where someone brought something from the continent to
Mm,
England
yeah.
and it spread the disease. Therefore, you've got to be careful of foreigners. Racism. Women who lived outside of the general vicinity of everyone else, which we would call social distancing, but she was maybe just a little bit of an outcast from everyone. And she had a cat. And so we found out that the Black Plague had something to do with the fleas that were on the rats. Well, someone who lives on their own and the rats get eaten by the cats or avoid the house because of the cats.
Yeah.
Well, those people are called witches because they survived the Black Death and everyone else in the village died. Well, that person must have done that to them. That's where that idea came from. And that pointing to a woman and saying you're a witch because you know something that we don't know, or you're better than us, or you avoided problems because we got them and you didn't.
Yeah.
Is all the remains of all the chauvinism today of men and men against women comes from that, and all the the lack of understanding between two groups. It all has to do with that period of history and all the things that were said in that period.
Yeah. You know, the
Has
interesting,
today given us what we believe.
the really interesting thing, like going back to when that happened, right? Different time in our evolutionary history, and by evolutionary, I don't mean physical, I mean intellectual. Obviously, no major mass media, no understanding of even how anything happened with the evolution of other species, let alone viruses and, microscopic threats. So when you can't understand something, and, you and I both know this one very clearly, is if the human mind can't make sense of something, it defaults and makes up the next best thing that you then stick to, and that can be done en masse, right?
And
I just find it amusing that the thing that we came to back in those days, it was a witch. I find that sometimes I just find that really amusing. It was, and then it was, well, we'll find out whether you're a witch or not because we'll put you in cement and throw you into the lake. If you sink all the way down and you die, you weren't a witch. Sorry about that. Isn't it funny? Have we come a long way?
I think one of the things that's funny is these ideas that we just have evolved versions of these conversations. So now we find someone in society to blame all our woes on. And I think that might be a really good place to sort of finish up on for this episode anyway.
Thanks for listening to Reality Defined. If you enjoyed this conversation, follow the show on Spotify and YouTube so you don't miss future episodes. See you next time.